He called her his new wife, in front of everyone at the company party, laughing as I stood in the corner, invisible to them all. Little did my husband know, I owned 51% of the company he worked for. And tomorrow, I would be chairing the board, meeting that decided his future. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of unexpected empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Now, let's dive in. I stood in the shadowed corner of our marble-floored living room, an invisible spectator at my own party. The chandelier, a wedding gift from my grandfather, cast a warm glow over 30 of Meridian Technologies' finest as they celebrated their record-breaking quarter. Crystal glasses clinked, designer shoes clicked across imported Italian tile, and laughter echoed off cathedral ceilings in the home that my family's money had purchased. My husband Daniel stood at the center of it all, his tailored Armani suit, a perfect match for his carefully cultivated corporate image. His arm was wrapped possessively around Sophia Matthews's waist, the brilliant, ambitious marketing director whose ideas Daniel had been claiming as his own for the past 6 months. "To my new work wife," Daniel announced loudly, raising his glass of 30-year-old scotch that had been aging since before he was born. My scotch, from my family's collection. The Richardson account would never have happened without her. Their colleagues erupted in appreciative laughter and applause. I maintained my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected over our 7 years of marriage, and nodded pleasantly when a few sympathetic glances were cast my way. "You're a lucky man," called out Richard from finance, his 4th drink making him bolder than usual. "Some of us wish we had 2 wives." More laughter, more clinking glasses, more uncomfortable glances my way. "Don't worry," Daniel replied with a theatrical whisper that carried across the room. "This one actually makes money for the company." The irony was exquisite. Daniel had invited his entire department to celebrate in our lakeside estate. Never once mentioning that every square foot had been purchased with Kingston money, the same family that had founded Meridian Technologies 3 generations ago. The company was my birthright, my inheritance, my legacy, and tomorrow it would become my instrument of justice. While Daniel paraded around as the rising star VP of operations, none of them knew that every promotion he'd received, every project he'd been assigned, had been carefully monitored through quarterly reports that came directly to me. The board members themselves didn't know my true identity, only that E.J. Kingston held 51% of company shares and communicated through encrypted video calls and carefully worded memos. To Daniel and his colleagues, I was just Elise, his quiet, supportive wife who dabbled in family investments while he built his impressive career. The story we'd crafted when we first met at that charity gala 7 years ago had served me well. 3 failed relationships with ambitious men had taught me caution. So when Daniel appeared with his charming smile and apparent support for independent women, I decided to test him. "You'll find your place," he'd said in those early days, encouraging what he thought was my modest investment portfolio. "Keep building. I believe in you." But as soon as we married and he secured his position at Meridian, a job he never suspected, I'd arranged through layers of corporate maneuvering. The mask began to slip. Success changed him. Or rather, revealed him. Tomorrow, the masquerade would end. The documents in my private study were ready, evidence of misconduct compiled by my most trusted ally, Rebecca, who served as both my executive assistant and Daniel's administrative supervisor without his knowledge. Systematic patterns of harassment, inappropriate relationships, and most damning of all, the recordings of tonight's party where my husband paraded his work wife while mocking my supposed financial dependence. "Remember when she tried to give advice on the Richardson merger?" Daniel was saying now, his words slightly slurred from expensive scotch. "Like she has any idea how business works. I told her to stick to planning dinner parties. The truth? I had architected the Richardson merger from the beginning, feeding strategic directives through the board, watching as Daniel claimed credit for every successful element while blaming others for the challenges. "Tell us how you landed it, Dan," urged Michael from sales, always eager to align himself with success. "Leadership instinct," Daniel replied with practiced modesty, pulling Sophia closer. "And having the right partner by my side. Sometimes you need a woman who understands the game." I caught Sophia's expression, a flicker of discomfort quickly masked by a professional smile. She wasn't a willing participant in his games. She was another victim of his manipulations. I made a mental note to ensure her position remained secure. After tomorrow's reckoning, I took another sip of water, checking my watch discreetly. In 14 hours, I would walk into the Meridian Technologies boardroom, not as Daniel's undermined wife, but as E.J. Kingston, majority owner and the newly revealed chairwoman of the company that had consumed his every waking moment for the past 5 years. The crystal glass felt cool against my palm as I made my way to the kitchen, ostensibly to check on catering, but actually to send a brief message to Rebecca. "Proceed with final preparations. Board members confirmed for 9 a.m. Her reply came instantly. "Security and legal standing by. Your suit is ready in the private office." Tomorrow, Daniel would discover what it truly meant to have a wife who understood the game. The wife he'd been betraying wasn't just Elise, his supportive spouse, but E.J. Kingston, the majority shareholder who had been watching his every move, documenting his every misstep, and preparing for the moment when his true character would be revealed to everyone. I rejoined the party, accepting a patronizing pat on the shoulder from Daniel as he continued holding court. "Don't wait up, sweetheart," he called as I announced I was heading upstairs. "We're celebrating something you wouldn't understand." I smiled softly, savoring the moment. "I wouldn't miss tomorrow for the world," I replied, a promise he completely misunderstood. The perfect revenge isn't served cold. It's served when they never saw it coming at all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The guests departed shortly after midnight, a parade of luxury vehicles navigating down our winding driveway as Daniel escorted the last of his colleagues out. Sophia lingered in the foyer, her professional mask slipping to reveal momentary discomfort as Daniel's hand rested too long on her shoulder. "Another successful Kingston party," he announced, as if he'd orchestrated every detail himself. In reality, I had arranged everything through the household staff, the same staff whose salaries were paid from my personal accounts. "The team loved it," Sophia replied carefully, extracting herself with practiced grace. "I should go. Early strategy meeting tomorrow." Daniel's smile faltered slightly. "I wasn't notified about any strategy meeting." "Department heads only," she replied, a flicker of professional authority asserting itself. "Director Marshall's request." I watched this exchange from the staircase, noting how quickly Daniel's charm transformed to irritation at the reminder that he wasn't invited to every meeting. This was his pattern: charm in public, control in private, and swift anger when either failed him. "I'll see you tomorrow, then," he conceded, his tone carrying that edge I knew too well. As vice president of operations, Daniel believed every department ultimately answered to him. The organizational chart supported this illusion, but the real power had always flowed invisibly through my directives. After Sophia departed, Daniel locked the front door and loosened his tie, the performance of perfect host abandoned now that no audience remained. He didn't acknowledge me as he poured another glass of scotch and disappeared into his home office, the smaller of the two executive studies in our home. Mine, concealed behind a bookcase in the library, was where the real business of Meridian Technologies had been conducted for years. I waited 20 minutes before slipping into the library, ensuring Daniel was absorbed in whatever post-party ritual occupied him these nights, reviewing emails, watching sports highlights, or messaging. Sophia under the guise of work follow-up. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 1 as I pressed the hidden panel behind the third bookshelf, revealing my sanctuary. The wall slid open soundlessly, a custom design that had cost more than Daniel's annual bonus. 3 monitors automatically illuminated, displaying real-time operations of Meridian Technologies across 5 continents. The center screen showed our Singapore office beginning their workday, the Hong Kong branch transitioning projects to our Frankfurt team, and our headquarters, in Chicago, preparing for tomorrow's pivotal board meeting. I settled into my custom ergonomic chair, the one Daniel had once mocked when he glimpsed it being delivered. $15,000 for a chair? This is why women shouldn't handle finances. If only he knew this chair had supported me through acquisition negotiations that added billions to Meridian's value. My private terminal required a palm scan, retinal verification, and a voice-activated password. The security would have seemed excessive to most, but when you're hiding your identity from your husband while controlling the company he works for, excessive becomes essential. The terminal chimed softly, acknowledging my identity. Welcome, E.J. Kingston. I pulled up the dossier Rebecca had been compiling for the past 18 months. It hadn't started as an investigation into Daniel specifically. It began as a standard audit of executive conduct following complaints from mid-level managers about toxic leadership. But as data accumulated, a pattern emerged with Daniel at its center. The file was labeled Project Glasshouse, named for the proverb about those in glass houses not throwing stones. Daniel had been throwing stones his entire career, unaware that his professional home was entirely transparent to me. The evidence was meticulously organized into categories: financial impropriety, expense reports that conveniently covered; personal dinners with Sophia and other female staff labeled as client meetings; performance manipulation, taking credit for successful initiatives while deflecting failures to subordinates. 3. Harassment documentation, 17 incidents, involving 8 different women, including Sophia, whose recent promotion Daniel had leveraged to establish their work-wife relationship; corporate policy violations, using company resources for personal benefit, sharing confidential information with unauthorized parties, bypassing security protocols. Most damning were the recorded conversations, legal in our state with single-party consent, where Daniel outlined his strategies for getting ahead to his inner circle. The latest recording was from just 2 weeks ago, a private lunch with Michael from sales. The key is finding the right woman in each department. Daniel's voice played through my headphones. Someone ambitious enough to do the work, but insecure enough to let you take the credit. Sophia's perfect, brilliant, but she still thinks she needs male approval to advance. My actual wife would never understand this game. She's too naive about how business really works. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. I had founded my first technology investment firm at 22, 3 years before, meeting Daniel. By 25, I had quietly acquired enough shares to become Meridian's majority stakeholder, operating through a complex structure of trusts and holding companies to maintain anonymity. My father, Edward Kingston Sr., had built Meridian from a small software development shop into a technology leader, but died unexpectedly when I was in college. His successor, my uncle Philip, nearly destroyed the company through a series of misguided acquisitions and outdated leadership practices that drove away top talent. Rather than fighting publicly for control, which would have further damaged the company my father built, I worked silently, strategically acquiring shares until I could influence decisions without revealing my identity. The board knew E.J. Kingston only as the reclusive majority shareholder who communicated through encrypted channels and never appeared in person. Even my name was strategic. Edward James Kingston Jr. was what everyone assumed, naturally thinking. I was my father's son and successor. The reality, Eleanor Jane Kingston, remained my closely guarded secret, known only to Rebecca and 3 trusted board members sworn to confidentiality. I met Daniel at a charity gala 7 years ago when I was 30. I had attended representing one of my smaller companies, deliberately downplaying my success. 3 painful relationships with men who saw me as their ticket to wealth and power had taught me caution. Daniel was charming, seemingly supportive, of ambitious women, and worked for a mid-sized competitor to Meridian. He pursued me with what I believed was genuine interest, never knowing my connection to the Kingston family or Meridian Technologies. 6 months into our relationship, I orchestrated his hiring at Meridian, not as nepotism, but as a test. I wanted to see his true professional character without the filter of our personal relationship. His initial performance was promising, combining charisma with apparent business acumen. The early promotions he received were earned. But 3 years ago, something changed. Perhaps it was the corner office, the executive title, or simply knowing he had secured me through marriage. But Daniel transformed from ambitious professional to entitled predator. The manipulation, the inappropriate relationships disguised as mentorship, the gradual erosion of female colleagues' confidence while he absorbed credit for their work. All of it documented in Project Glasshouse. My finger hovered over the file containing tomorrow's presentation to the board. The case was ironclad, reviewed by Meridian's outside counsel with all names redacted. The recommendation was clear. Immediate termination for cause. A notification appeared on my phone. A message from Rebecca. Final security preparations complete. Board chairman confirms 9 a.m. start. Your office has been prepared. I had maintained an executive office at Meridian headquarters since becoming majority shareholder, though it remained unused and sealed. Tomorrow I would claim it publicly. Another message followed. Daniel's calendar shows 11 a.m. meeting with Richardson client. Should we reschedule? I smiled at the perfection of this timing. The Richardson account, Meridian's largest client acquisition this year, had been my strategy, executed through Daniel's team. He had taken full credit while dismissing my input at home. Now, he would miss the meeting entirely. No, I typed back. I'll take the meeting personally after the board session. The clock on my desk showed 2:17 a.m. In less than 7 hours, I would transform from invisible wife to visible chairwoman. Daniel's world, built on manipulation and misplaced confidence, would collapse under the weight of his own actions. I closed the dossier and shut down the monitors, watching as the wall panel slid closed behind me. In our bedroom, Daniel was already asleep, sprawled across his side of the custom king bed, oblivious to what awaited him in the morning. As I changed into silk pajamas, maintaining the charade for one final night, I thought about my father's words, spoken when I was just 16. Power isn't about who speaks the loudest, Eleanor. It's about who observes the most, plans the longest, and acts at precisely the right moment. Tomorrow would be that moment, when Daniel and everyone at Meridian Technologies discovered that the wife he had underestimated, mocked, and betrayed was actually the woman who controlled everything. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. and slipped into bed, maintaining a careful distance from Daniel's sleeping form. For the first time in years, I fell asleep instantly, knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. Morning arrived with the precision of a well-designed algorithm. My eyes opened at 5:28 a.m., 2 minutes before my alarm was set to ring. Beside me, Daniel remained asleep, his breathing heavy from the previous night's indulgences. For a moment, I studied his face, handsome still, relaxed in sleep in a way it rarely was awake. Once I had found that face charming, trustworthy, even loving, now I saw only the mask he wore, a carefully crafted facade that had fooled me for too long. I slipped from the bed without disturbing him and padded silently to the ensuite bathroom, locking the door behind me. Today's preparation required more than my usual morning routine. Today, Eleanor Kingston would become visible after years in the shadows. Steam filled the glass-enclosed shower as I methodically planned each moment of the coming hours. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., which meant I needed to arrive at Meridian's headquarters by 8:30. Daniel usually left for the office at 7:45, giving me a perfect window to make my entrance without crossing paths prematurely. As I dried my hair, I heard Daniel stirring in the bedroom, followed by the familiar sound of him checking his phone before even fully awake, the Pavlovian response of a man who believed his professional life demanded constant attention. Little did he know that many of those urgent emails were timed releases I had approved days earlier, creating the illusion of an organization that couldn't function without him. I selected my armor carefully, a charcoal Chanel suit I had never worn in Daniel's presence, kept in a locked section of my closet he had never questioned. The matching Louboutin heels had similarly never seen the light of day in our shared life. To Daniel, my wardrobe consisted of understated, expensive, but not ostentatious clothing that reinforced his image of me as the tasteful but ultimately inconsequential spouse. The diamond studs I chose had been my mother's, a reminder of the Kingston legacy I carried. When I emerged from the bathroom, Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through emails with a scowl that deepened the lines around his mouth. "You're up early," he commented without looking up. "I have some charity committee meetings," I replied, the familiar lie sliding easily from my lips. For years, fictional charity work had served as my cover for business obligations. Daniel grunted in acknowledgement, still focused on his phone. "I might be home late tonight. The Richardson team wants to discuss strategy after our formal meeting." Another, "Was?" I had personally reviewed Daniel's calendar yesterday. There was no planned after-hours meeting with Richardson. This was undoubtedly his cover for more time with Sophia. "I made reservations for our anniversary dinner on Friday," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Le Cirque at 8. For a moment, panic flashed across his face. Our anniversary wasn't for another 3 months, and we both knew it. It was a small test, one I had deployed occasionally throughout our marriage to gauge his attentiveness. "Friday's not our anniversary," he replied, finally looking up with irritation. "It's in June." "I was just checking if you were listening," I said with a practiced smile. "You seem distracted this morning." His expression softened slightly, not from affection but relief at avoiding a perceived trap. "Big day. The Richardson account review is crucial." "I'm sure you'll handle it perfectly," I said, the irony of my statement lost on him. "You always do." He nodded, accepting the compliment as his due while heading to the shower. As water began running, I took the opportunity to send a final confirmation to Rebecca. "Proceeding as planned. Track his movements after he leaves, her." Response was immediate. "Security team in position. Your office is prepared. Board members have been briefed on the special agenda item." I applied the finishing touches to my appearance. Subtle makeup that would photograph well for what would undoubtedly become historic company images, a light application of my signature perfume, and the final crucial element. A small emerald. Pin on my lapel shaped like the Meridian Technologies logo. This pin, designed by my father decades ago, was given only to founding family members. Mine had remained in a safe deposit box since I began my shadow operation. Today, it would serve as physical proof of my identity if anyone dared to question me. Daniel emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, and paused when he saw me fully dressed. "You look different," he said, eyes narrowing slightly, as he took in my appearance. "New suit," I replied simply. "The charity board includes some significant donors. It pays to make an impression," he snorted lightly. "Spending my money to impress the country club crowd. At least someone takes your efforts seriously." There it was, the casual dismissal, the reminder that he believed I lived on his largesse, the implicit belittling of activities he deemed frivolous. Each comment added another brick to the wall of evidence that would soon fall on him. Someone certainly will, I agreed, turning to leave before my expression betrayed the truth. Have a productive day, Daniel. I descended the curved staircase to the kitchen, where Mrs. Hayes, our housekeeper of 5 years, was already preparing coffee. Unlike Daniel, Mrs. Hayes knew exactly who signed her generous checks. "Good morning, Miss Kingston," she said quietly, sliding a cup of perfectly prepared coffee toward me. "Today's the day, then?" "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. When Mr. Morrison leaves, please ensure the security team has access to his home office. They'll need to secure certain documents." She nodded efficiently. "Already arranged. The locksmith will arrive at 8:30 to change the front door codes." "Thank you." I sipped my coffee, savoring the last moments of my double life. "Has Rebecca sent the car?" "Waiting at the end of the drive, as requested. Mr. Morrison won't see it when he leaves." The sound of Daniel's footsteps on the stairs signaled it was time for one final performance. I quickly adopted my usual breakfast posture, seated at the kitchen island, scrolling through a lifestyle magazine rather than financial reports, the picture of leisurely privilege. Daniel entered the kitchen in his standard power suit, a dark navy Tom Ford he believed projected authority. He barely glanced at me as he accepted coffee from Mrs. Hayes and grabbed a protein bar from the counter. "I'll call if I'll be later than 9, he said, checking his watch. The Patek Philippe I had given him for our 5th anniversary purchased. With Kingston money, though, he believed it came from my modest family trust. "The Richardson meeting is at 11? I asked innocently. "I remember you mentioning it last night." "Yes," he replied, impatience coloring his tone. "Though I don't know why you bother keeping track of my schedule when you can barely manage your own appointments." The reference was to a deliberately missed lunch with his mother last month, a woman who had made it her mission to remind me how fortunate I was that her son had settled for someone with so little professional ambition. "Someone in this marriage should know where the other is," I replied mildly. His phone buzzed, providing him an escape from further conversation. "I need to take this," he said, already moving toward the door. "Michael's having issues with the presentation." Of course he was. Michael from sales had been carefully instructed by Rebecca to create minor problems that would occupy Daniel throughout the morning, ensuring he wouldn't arrive at the board meeting until precisely the right moment. Daniel paused. At the door, an unusual hesitation in his normally decisive departures. For a moment, I wondered if some instinct was warning him, some subconscious recognition that today was different. "You're sure you're just going to charity meetings?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as they took in my outfit once more. "Where else would I be going?" I countered, raising an eyebrow. "The boardroom of a Fortune 500 company?" He laughed, tension broken by what he perceived as an absurd suggestion. "Right. Well, try not to bankrupt us with whatever fundraiser they talk you into supporting this time." And with that final patronizing remark, he was gone. The front door closed with its characteristic heavy thud, followed by the sound of his BMW starting in the circular drive. Mrs. Hayes waited until his car disappeared down the driveway before speaking. "The security team confirms he's left the property, Ms. Kingston." I stood, abandoning the pretense of casual interest in my magazine. "Then it's time for E.J. Kingston to arrive at Meridian Technologies." My phone chimed with a message from Rebecca. "Daniel has left home. Estimated arrival at HQ 8:15 a.m. He's scheduled for pre-meeting coffee with Sophia at 8:30 in the executive lounge." Of course he was. The executive lounge, with its convenient proximity to rarely used conference rooms, had featured prominently in several harassment complaints. Today's meeting with Sophia was undoubtedly designed to pressure her further into their inappropriate work-wife relationship before the Richardson presentation. "Proceed with surveillance," I replied. "I want video of their interaction." While I had more than enough evidence already, Daniel's behavior this morning would provide fresh ammunition, the final confirmation that his pattern of misconduct wasn't isolated but systematic. Mrs. Hayes handed me a slim leather portfolio, containing duplicate copies of all critical documents. "The car is ready, Ms. Kingston. Rebecca had your executive ID badge delivered this morning." I examined the badge, my actual photograph paired with my full name, Eleanor J. Kingston, and the title that had remained invisible for so long, chairwoman and majority shareholder. "The board members are already gathering," Mrs. Hayes continued, relaying information from her own communications with the security team. "Mr. Chen from legal has the sealed documents ready for distribution." I nodded, feeling a curious calm settle over me. The years of planning, of watching from the shadows, of documenting every transgression while maintaining my cover, all of it had led to this moment. There was no anxiety, no last-minute doubt, only the absolute certainty that justice delayed was about to become justice delivered. "It's strange," I said, more to myself than to Mrs. Hayes. "I've owned the company for nearly a decade, but today is the first day I'll actually walk through the front doors as myself." Mrs. Hayes, ever proper but unfailingly loyal, allowed herself a small smile. "Sometimes the longest journeys end with a single step, Ms. Kingston." That step was about to shake the foundations of Meridian Technologies, starting with the man who believed he was essential to its success while being oblivious to who truly held the power. I checked my watch, a discreet Patek Philippe Calatrava that had belonged to my father. It was 7:30 a.m. In 90 minutes, the board meeting would begin. In less than 2 hours, Daniel Morrison would learn that the wife he had dismissed, belittled, and betrayed was not just Eleanor Kingston, dutiful spouse, but E.J. Kingston. The power behind everything he had believed was his. "Let's go," I said, straightening my shoulders and lifting my chin. "It's time for Eleanor to become E.J." As I walked toward the waiting car, I felt the weight of the Emerald Company pin on my lapel, the visible symbol of a power that had remained invisible for far too long. Today, that would change. Today, the mask would fall away, revealing the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The catalyst had been Daniel's new wife comment, the public humiliation that crystallized years of private disrespect. But the breaking point wasn't emotional, it was strategic. The perfect moment had arrived when all elements aligned. The evidence was complete, the board was prepared, and Daniel's arrogance had reached its peak. As Mrs. Hayes closed the car door behind me, I took one last look at the house Daniel believed he had provided, the home that had always been mine. By tonight, he would understand exactly what it meant to call another woman his wife, when his actual wife owned not just their home, but his entire professional world. The executive car glided through morning traffic, its tinted windows shielding me from curious eyes as we approached downtown. Chicago's skyline rose before us, dominated by the sleek glass tower that housed Meridian Technologies' global headquarters. For years, I had observed this building from a distance, monitoring operations through reports, video conferences, and Rebecca's detailed briefings. Today, I would walk its halls not as a ghost, but as its rightful owner. "We're approaching headquarters, Ms. Kingston," my driver, Thomas, announced. A former military intelligence officer, Thomas had been part of my security team for 5 years. "Security confirms the private entrance is clear." "No," I decided, watching the main entrance with its steady stream of employees beginning their workday. "Today we use the front door." Thomas raised an eyebrow but nodded. "As you wish. I'll alert the security team?" My phone buzzed with an update from Rebecca. Daniel arrived at 8:17, currently in executive lounge with Sophia. She appears uncomfortable. Video surveillance active. Perfect. The pieces were moving into place with clockwork precision. As we pulled up to the main entrance, I took a moment to study the building my father had commissioned 20 years ago. The distinctive blue-green glass exterior, designed to evoke both water and technology, had become an iconic part of Chicago's business district. The logo that adorned the entrance, an elegant stylized M, with a digital circuit running through. It had been my mother's design, though few remembered that now. "Ready, Miss Kingston?" Thomas asked, hand on the door. I nodded, feeling a curious sense of homecoming. This building, this company, they had always been mine, experienced through proxies and distance. Now, I would reclaim them in person. Thomas opened the door, and I stepped onto the plaza that fronted the Meridian Tower. Several employees glanced my way, noting the executive car but not recognizing me. Their gazes slipped away, assuming I was just another visiting executive or important client. I walked with measured confidence toward the revolving doors, aware that with each step I was shedding the invisible cloak I had worn for years. At the security desk inside the soaring lobby, I presented my ID badge, the one that had been created yesterday and had never been used. The security officer, a recent hire who wouldn't recognize the significance of the name, scanned the badge routinely. The system beeped its approval, but then he looked more closely at the title displayed on his screen. His eyes widened slightly. "Ms. Kingston," he said, his professional demeanor momentarily slipping as he realized who stood before him. "I wasn't informed. That is, we weren't expecting—" "It's quite all right," I assured him calmly. "This visit was arranged directly with the board." Rebecca appeared as if summoned, striding across the lobby with the efficient grace that had made her invaluable to my operation. In person, she projected an aura of unassailable competence, crisp suit, tablet in hand, expression revealing nothing but professional courtesy. "Ms. Kingston?" she greeted me, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby employees. "The board is gathering in Conference Room A. I'll escort you." Heads turned throughout the lobby. The name Kingston carried weight at Meridian, though few had ever connected it to Daniel Morrison's wife. I could almost see the questions forming as Rebecca guided me toward the executive elevator, a lift that required special access, and one that Daniel used daily, believing it a perk of his position rather than my provision. "Daniel is still with Sophia," Rebecca murmured as the elevator doors closed, sealing us in privacy. "She's been trying to leave for 15 minutes, but he keeps insisting they need to align on strategy before the Richardson meeting. And our surveillance? Crystal clear audio and video. He's pressuring her to sit next to him during the presentation and suggesting they should celebrate privately after closing the deal." I nodded, unsurprised. "And the board?" "All present. Except Harrison, who's on video conference from London. They've been told only that E.J. Kingston is making a personal appearance to address an urgent governance matter." The elevator rose smoothly to the 50th floor, executive territory where decisions affecting thousands of employees and billions in shareholder value were made daily. As the doors opened, I stepped into a world Daniel believed he commanded. The tie. Executive floor was designed to impress. Understated luxury in every detail, from the original artwork on the walls to the hand-knotted silk rugs that softened footsteps. At the center was a sweeping reception desk staffed by Lisa Chen, who had served as executive floor coordinator for 15 years. Unlike the lobby security guard, Lisa recognized me immediately, not as E.J. Kingston, but as Daniel Morrison's wife who occasionally attended company functions. The confusion on her face was immediate and profound. "Mrs. Morrison?" she began, then stopped abruptly as Rebecca subtly shook her head. "Ms. Kingston," Rebecca corrected smoothly. "Here to meet with the board." Lisa's eyes dropped to the ID badge visible on my lapel, then to the emerald company pin beside it. Understanding dawned in her expression, followed by a moment of perfect professional recovery. "Of course, Ms. Kingston," she replied, as though she had always known my true identity. "Conference room A is ready for you. May I offer you anything?" "Before the meeting?" "No, thank you, Lisa," I replied, impressed by her composure. "But I appreciate your discretion in this matter." She nodded, the slightest smile touching her lips. Lisa had worked under my father's leadership and had weathered the tumultuous years of my uncle's mismanagement. If office rumors were correct, she had also endured Daniel's condescension daily. "It's an honor to finally meet you officially, Ms. Kingston," she said quietly. Rebecca guided me through the executive suite toward the boardroom, passing Daniel's corner office along the way. His door was open, revealing the space he had decorated to project power, awards displayed prominently, furniture arranged to place visitors at a psychological disadvantage, and photographs featuring Daniel with various business luminaries, most of whom I had arranged for him to meet. Next to his office was Sophia's considerably smaller space, currently empty while she endured Daniel's strategy session in the lounge. I paused, noting the organized precision of her workspace, evidence of the genuine talent Daniel exploited. "She's one of our most valuable team members," Rebecca noted, following my gaze. The Richardson acquisition was primarily her strategy, though Daniel presented it as his own. "Make a note," I instructed. "After today, she's to be promoted to Senior Director with a compensation review." Rebecca nodded, adding it to her tablet. "Already anticipated. The paperwork is prepared." We continued past the executive suite toward the boardroom corridor. Along the way was another office, larger than Daniel's, with double doors of polished walnut bearing a simple nameplate, E.J. Kingston, Chairwoman. This office had remained sealed for years, maintained but never occupied. Rebecca produced a key card and swiped it against the hidden reader. The doors unlocked with an audible click. "Your office is prepared," she said. "Would you like to see it before the board meeting?" I considered the closed doors, the physical representation of the position I had maintained from afar. "No," I decided. "There will be time for that after. The board is waiting." At the end of the corridor stood Conference Room A, Meridian's primary boardroom where every major decision in the company's history had been made. Two security officers flanked the entrance, both straightening visibly as I approached. "Ms. Kingston," they acknowledged in unison, opening the heavy doors. Inside, 11 men and women, Meridian's board of directors, rose from their seats as I entered. Most wore expressions of controlled surprise, though 3 recognized me immediately. Jonathan Chen, our legal counsel who had helped structure my anonymous ownership. Maria Vasquez, chief financial officer who had executed my financial strategies. And Robert Blackwell, my father's oldest friend, and the board's senior member. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca announced formally, "Ms. Eleanor Jane Kingston, majority, shareholder and chairwoman of Meridian Technologies." Robert stepped forward, extending his hand. "After all these years," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Edward would be proud to see you take your rightful place." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Robert. I believe it's time for Meridian to move in a new direction." Maria approached next, professional as always, but with a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "The quarterly reports did not do justice to your leadership, Ms. Kingston. It's an honor to finally work with you directly." The remaining board members introduced themselves with varying degrees of confusion and respect. Most had assumed E.J. Kingston was a reclusive male investor, possibly my father's previously unknown son or nephew. The revelation of my identity and my relationship to Daniel Morrison created a ripple of whispered conversations around the table. "Please be seated," I instructed, taking my place at the head of the table, the chair that had remained symbolically empty during video conferences, with E.J. Kingston over the years. Rebecca took her position to my right, tablet ready. "I understand this appearance comes as a surprise to most of you," I began, my voice calm but carrying the natural authority that had been carefully edited from my interactions with Daniel. For nearly a decade, I have overseen Meridian's operations from a distance, for reasons that will become clear shortly. Jonathan Chen distributed sealed folders to each board member. "The documents before you outline a pattern of misconduct that requires immediate action," he explained. Ms. Kingston has compiled extensive evidence of activities that violate not only company policy, but potentially federal workplace regulations. The board members opened their folders, expressions shifting from confusion to concern as they reviewed the contents. The primary subject of this investigation, I continued, is Daniel Morrison, Vice President of Operations, and, as some of you may now realize, my husband. The revelation sent another wave of murmurs around the table. Robert Blackwell's expression hardened as he reviewed the documentation. "These allegations are extremely serious," he commented. "Sexual harassment, financial impropriety, misappropriation of company resources. All thoroughly documented," Jonathan confirmed. "The evidence includes witness statements, financial records, electronic communications, and surveillance footage, all collected legally and with appropriate authorization from Ms. Kingston in her capacity as majority shareholder." I activated the presentation screen, displaying a timeline of Daniel's misconduct. This pattern began approximately 3 years ago and has escalated significantly in recent months. The most recent incident occurred last night at our home, during a company gathering where Mr. Morrison referred to Sophia Matthews as his new wife, while making disparaging remarks about my supposed financial dependence on him. The irony was not lost on the board members, several of whom exchanged glances. "The recommendation before you," I continued, "is immediate termination for cause, effective today." Robert leaned forward. "Given your personal relationship with Mr. Morrison, Ms. Kingston, how do you wish to proceed with the actual termination?" I checked my watch, 8:47 a.m. Daniel would still be with Sophia in the executive lounge, likely growing impatient as the Richardson meeting approached. "Mr. Morrison will be invited to join this board meeting at 9:15, I replied. "I believe it's appropriate that he learn of both my identity and the consequences of his actions simultaneously in the presence of this board." Maria Vasquez nodded approvingly. "A fitting approach, given the public nature of his misconduct. There is one additional matter," I added, nodding to Rebecca, who distributed a second set of documents. "These are the results of a broader investigation into the executive culture that enabled Mr. Morrison's behavior. 3 additional executives have been identified as either participating in or deliberately ignoring harassment patterns." The board reviewed the new information, faces growing increasingly grave. "This is a systemic failure of oversight," admitted Helen Grant, head of the governance committee. "We should have recognized these patterns earlier." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have, which is why, following today's terminations, I will be taking a more visible role in Meridian's governance structure, beginning with a complete review of our harassment policies and reporting procedures." The statement hung in the air, not quite an accusation, but a clear indication that the days of distant oversight were ending. The board members nodded in collective agreement, recognizing both the justice and necessity of the changes to come. As the minutes ticked closer to 9:15, Rebecca received a message on her tablet. "Mr. Morrison has left the executive lounge and is returning to his office." Ms. Matthews appeared visibly relieved at his departure. I nodded, a sense of calm purpose settling over me. The strategy had been years in formation, meticulously planned and flawlessly executed to this point. The game Daniel thought he was winning was about to reveal itself as something entirely different. "Please ask security to escort Mr. Morrison to this meeting at precisely 9:15, I instructed. "It's time he learns who he's really been working for all these years." As the board prepared for the confrontation to come, I thought of the emerald pin on my lapel, the symbol of Kingston leadership that had remained hidden for so long. Today, it would be the first thing Daniel saw when he entered the boardroom, the first indication that the wife he had dismissed as inconsequential was about to change his world forever. The boardroom fell into a focused hush as the digital clock on the wall approached 9:15. Each board member reviewed the documentation before them, occasionally exchanging glances that communicated their collective shock at the extent of Daniel's misconduct. The evidence was comprehensive, a meticulous record of inappropriate behavior that had somehow flourished beneath their oversight. "In the interest of complete transparency," I said, breaking the silence, "I want to address what some of you may be thinking. Yes, I could have taken action sooner. I could have revealed myself years ago when the first complaints about Daniel's behavior emerged." Robert Blackwell nodded slowly. "Why now, Eleanor? Why maintain the charade for so long?" It was a fair question, one I had asked myself repeatedly during sleepless nights as Project Glasshouse expanded from isolated incidents to a pattern of systemic abuse. When I first became majority shareholder, Meridian was still recovering from my uncle's mismanagement, I explained. The company needed stability, not another leadership upheaval. Operating as a distant but consistent presence allowed me to implement necessary changes without disrupting operations. Maria Vasquez nodded in understanding. "And your marriage to Morrison?" When we met, Daniel showed genuine promise. Ambitious, but apparently ethical. I believed he could grow into a valuable leader. My voice remained steady, though the admission cost me. By the time I recognized my mistake, simply firing him would have addressed only the symptom, not the disease that allowed his behavior to flourish. Jonathan Chen leaned forward. "You needed comprehensive evidence of the broader cultural problems." "Precisely. Daniel is not an isolated case. He's the most egregious example of an executive culture that has tolerated harassment and discrimination for too long." I gestured to the second set of documents before them. These 3 additional executives followed his example, believing his behavior established an acceptable standard. Helen Grant, who had served on the board for 15 years, removed her glasses with a troubled expression. "I've known Daniel since he joined Meridian. I never would have thought." "That's exactly the problem," I replied evenly. "None of us want to believe colleagues we respect are capable of such behavior, which is why objective evidence rather than personal impression must guide our actions." Rebecca's tablet chimed softly. She glanced at the screen, then at me. "Security is escorting Mr. Morrison to the boardroom. He appears agitated about the unexpected meeting." I nodded, feeling an unusual calm settle over me. The moment of revelation, planned for years but catalyzed by last night's humiliation, was seconds away. "One final point before Mr. Morrison joins us," I addressed the board. "After today's actions, Meridian will need to implement significant cultural changes. I intend to take a direct role in that process, transitioning from invisible shareholder to visible chairwoman." Robert Blackwell smiled for the first time that morning. "Edward always said you were the true heir to Meridian's future. I believe he would be proud to see you reclaim your rightful place." Before I could respond, voices became audible in the corridor outside, one distinctly Daniel's, raised in irritation. "This is ridiculous," he was saying. "I have the Richardson presentation in less than 2 hours. The board knows better than to schedule last-minute meetings during critical client preparations." The security officer's response was inaudible, but Daniel's subsequent scoff carried clearly through the door. "E.J. Kingston? In person? That recluse hasn't set foot in this building in a decade. This had better be important." Every board member turned toward the door, tension palpable as the handle turned. Daniel strode into the boardroom with the confident swagger of a man who believed himself indispensable. He nodded curtly to the board members, his gaze sweeping the room before freezing when it reached me. Confusion crossed his face, followed by recognition, bewilderment, and the first flicker of apprehension. "Elise?" he said, using my personal name rather than the professional form. "What are you doing here? Is something wrong at home?" I met his gaze steadily, allowing silence to stretch between us as realization slowly dawned in his eyes. His attention dropped to my lapel, where the emerald Kingston pin gleamed in the boardroom's carefully calibrated lighting. "Please join us, Mr. Morrison," I said, my voice carrying the authority I had withheld from our private interactions. The board has been reviewing some concerning matters that require your immediate attention. Daniel remained frozen in the doorway, his brain visibly struggling to reconcile his wife's presence at the head of Meridian's boardroom table. "I don't understand," he managed finally. "Why are you conducting a board meeting? Where is Mr. Kingston?" "Robert." Blackwell cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps you should sit down." Daniel took a seat at the far end of the table, as distant from me as possible, his expression cycling through confusion, alarm, and the beginning stages of comprehension. "Daniel," I began, "let me clarify the situation. My name is Eleanor Jane Kingston. For the past 7 years, you have known me as Elise Morrison, your wife. However, my primary identity, the one relevant to this meeting, is E.J. Kingston, founder's daughter, majority shareholder, and chairwoman of Meridian Technologies." The blood drained from his face as the full implications hit him. His eyes darted to the other board members, searching for some indication that this was an elaborate joke. "That's impossible," he whispered. "E.J. Kingston is sitting before you," Jonathan Chen finished firmly. "Ms. Kingston's identity has been closely guarded for strategic reasons, known only to select board members until today." Daniel's expression hardened as he processed this revelation. "This is some kind of trick. Elise doesn't know the first thing. About running a technology company, she manages charity committees and plans dinner parties." I smiled slightly, allowing him to continue digging the hole that would eventually swallow his career. "Is that so?" I replied. "Then perhaps you can explain why quarterly reviews of your department consistently aligned with my suggestions at home, the ones you dismissed as naive and uninformed." His eyes widened as connections formed, advice offered and rejected, strategies implemented months later as if they were his own ideas. Casual questions about departments that later faced restructuring. "The Richardson account," he said slowly. "The approach we're presenting today was my strategy," I confirmed. "The same one you mocked when I suggested it during dinner 3 months ago." Daniel's face flushed with anger, embarrassment, and dawning fear. "Why the charade? Why pretend to be my supportive, financially dependent wife if you owned the company all along?" It was the question I had anticipated, the one that revealed how fundamentally he had misunderstood both me and the Kai. Situation. When we met Daniel, I had already experienced relationships with men who valued me only for my wealth and position. I presented myself as financially comfortable, but not extraordinary to see who you truly were. I gestured to the folders before each board member. "Over time, you showed me exactly who that person is." Daniel glanced at the folders, then back at me, hostility replacing shock. "So this is what? Some elaborate revenge because I called Sophia my work wife at a party? An overreaction? To a harmless joke?" I pushed a button on the conference table, activating the room's display screen. It lit up with security footage from the executive lounge taken just 30 minutes earlier. Daniel standing too close to Sophia, his hand on her lower back as she attempted to create distance between them. This morning's interaction with Ms. Matthews is just the latest in a pattern of harassment documented over the past 3 years, I explained clinically. Project Glasshouse contains evidence of 17 separate incidents involving 8 female employees, financial impropriety through manipulated expense reports, misappropriation of company resources, and abuses of power that violate not only Meridian's policies, but federal workplace regulations. Daniel stared at the screen, watching his own behavior with dawning horror as the implications became clear. "You've been spying on me? Your own husband?" "I've been protecting my company and its employees," I corrected. "As chairwoman, that is. Both my responsibility and my right." He turned to the other board members, desperate for allies. "This is a personal vendetta. She's using company resources to settle a marital dispute." Robert Blackwell shook his head. "The evidence speaks for itself, Morrison. Your behavior has been independently verified by outside counsel. This isn't about your marriage. It's about..." Your violations of company policy and basic professional ethics. Daniel's shoulders slumped momentarily before his natural arrogance reasserted itself. Fine. I accept that my behavior with Sophia crossed some lines. I'll apologize, take sensitivity training, whatever HR thinks appropriate. But this level of subterfuge, he gestured toward me, seems disproportionate to the offense. I leaned forward, maintaining perfect composure. Last night, you called Sophia Matthews your new wife in front of your entire team. You mocked my intelligence, my financial contribution to our marriage, and my professional capabilities, none of which you actually knew or understood. His expression turned calculating. It was a joke, Elise. Ms. Kingston, Rebecca corrected, sharply. Ms. Kingston, he amended with poorly concealed contempt. Workplace humor that crossed a line. I acknowledge that. But surely 7 years of marriage counts for something in how we resolve this. I studied him for a moment. This man who had shared my home, my bed, my life for 7 years, yet had never truly seen me. Even now, facing irrefutable evidence of his misconduct, he was attempting to manipulate the situation, to leverage our personal relationship to mitigate professional consequences. Our marriage and your employment are separate matters, Daniel, I replied evenly. Though I suspect both are ending today. The finality in my tone cut through his last defenses. For the first time, genuine fear replaced calculation in his eyes. You're firing me? Over this? The board is terminating your employment for cause, effective immediately, Jonathan Chen clarified, sliding a document across the table. This details the terms of your separation, including the forfeiture of all unvested stock options and performance bonuses as specified in your employment contract. Daniel stared at the termination papers, his hands shaking slightly as he processed the collapse of his carefully constructed world. This will ruin me, he said, looking up with a mixture of anger and disbelief. You know that, right? No company will hire an executive fired for harassment. Perhaps you should have considered that before establishing a pattern of behavior that made termination necessary, Maria Vasquez replied coolly. Daniel's gaze returned to me, desperation now evident. Elise, Eleanor, whatever you're calling yourself now. We can work through this. I admit I've been arrogant, insensitive at times, but throwing away our marriage along with my career seems extreme. I regarded him silently for a moment, remembering the young man I had initially seen potential in, before power and entitlement had corrupted him. That person was long gone, replaced by someone who viewed relationships, personal and professional, as tools for advancement rather than connections to be honored. Our marriage ended last night, Daniel, I said quietly. The moment you publicly humiliated me while celebrating your new wife. Today is simply the formality of acknowledging that truth. The finality in my tone seemed to penetrate at last. His expression shifted from desperation to cold fury. You orchestrated all of this, he said, voice low and dangerous. You trapped me. No, Daniel. You trapped yourself through your own actions and choices. I nodded to the security officers who had taken positions by the door. Your company credentials and access have already been deactivated. Security will escort you to your office to collect personal belongings, then off the premises. He rose slowly, the controlled facade cracking to reveal the rage beneath. This isn't over. I'm entitled to half of everything in a divorce, including your precious company shares, Jonathan Chen smiled thinly. Perhaps you should review the prenuptial agreement you signed, Mr. Morrison, the one that specifically excludes all Kingston family holdings, including Meridian Technologies shares, from marital assets. Daniel froze, visibly searching his memory, for the details of a document he had clearly never read carefully. You'll be hearing from my lawyers, he threatened, a last desperate attempt to salvage some control. We anticipated that, I replied calmly. Mr. Chen has prepared comprehensive responses to any potential legal challenges you might consider. Though I suggest you review the evidence we've compiled before pursuing litigation that would make all of it public record. Defeated but still defiant, Daniel straightened his tie, a futile gesture to reclaim dignity in a situation rapidly spiraling beyond his control. "Security will see you out," I said, turning my attention to the documents before me in clear dismissal. "Your personal items from our home will be delivered to your mother's address by this evening." As security officers moved to escort him from the boardroom, Daniel paused at the door, turning back with a bitter smile. "You know what's ironic? All these years I thought I married beneath me," he said. "Turns out I never knew you at all." With that final observation, perhaps the most honest thing he'd said in years, Daniel Morrison was escorted from the boardroom, from Meridian Technologies, and from the life we had shared. As the door closed behind him, I felt a complex wave of emotions, not triumph or satisfaction, but a somber sense of necessary justice finally delivered. "Well," Robert Blackwell said quietly, breaking the tension, "Edward would indeed be proud of you today, Eleanor." I nodded, gathering my professional composure. "The day isn't over yet. We still have 3 more executives to address, a company, culture to reform, and," I checked my watch, "a Richardson account presentation at 11 that I'll be handling personally." The board members exchanged glances of grudging admiration. The invisible hand that had guided Meridian for years was now visible, and clearly prepared to lead with the same quiet strength that had built the company from the shadows. Rebecca's tablet chimed with an update. "Mr. Morrison has been escorted from the building," she reported, "and Ms. Matthews is waiting in your office as requested." I rose from my seat, signaling the end of this phase of the meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock to address the remaining matters." For now, I believe it's time I formally introduced myself to the company I've owned for the past decade. As I exited the boardroom toward the office that had awaited me for years, I thought about Daniel's parting words. "I thought I married beneath me. Turns out I never knew you at all." He was right about one thing. He had never truly known me. But today, Meridian Technologies and Daniel Morrison had finally met Eleanor Jane Kingston. The aftermath of a storm is often as revealing as the tempest itself. As I walked from the boardroom toward my office, the space that had remained untouched during my years of shadow leadership, I could feel the ripples of change already spreading through Meridian Technologies. Employees who had never seen me before stopped mid-conversation as I passed, their eyes registering the Emerald Kingston pin, then moving to my ID badge with barely concealed shock. News traveled at the speed of digital messaging through a technology company, and the revelation that E.J. Kingston was not only present in the building, but was also Daniel Morrison's supposedly unemployed wife, had undoubtedly reached every department. By now, Rebecca walked beside me, tablet in hand, occasionally answering urgent messages as we moved through the executive corridor. "Security reports that Mr. Morrison is still in the lobby," she informed me quietly. "He's demanding to speak with the company's external counsel." "Has he contacted his personal attorney yet?" "Yes, 3 calls in the past 15 minutes. Also, 2 attempts to reach Sophia's cell phone, which she's not answering." I nodded, unsurprised by Daniel's desperate attempts to regain control of a situation that had spun irrevocably beyond his grasp. The pattern was familiar. First deny, then deflect, finally seek leverage through any available connection. "Ms. Matthews is waiting in your office," Rebecca continued. "She appears quite anxious about being summoned immediately after Mr. Morrison's departure." "Understandably so," I replied. "She likely believes she's being terminated as well, given their public association." We reached the double walnut doors that had remained closed for so many years. Rebecca swiped her access card, and the doors opened to reveal the chairwoman's office, my office, preserved like a time capsule from my father's era. The space was impressive without being ostentatious. Corner windows providing panoramic views of Chicago's skyline, walls lined with awards and historical photographs from Meridian's founding years, and at the center, a massive desk carved from a single piece of walnut, commissioned by my father when the company went public. Sophia Matthews stood by the windows, tension evident in her rigid posture. She turned as we entered, her professional mask firmly in place though her eyes betrayed apprehension. "Ms. Kingston," she said, extending her hand with admirable composure given the circumstances. "Or should I say Mrs. Morrison? I confess I'm not sure how to address you." "Ms. Kingston is appropriate in this setting," I replied, accepting her. Handshake. "Please, sit down. This conversation is not what you're likely expecting." Relief flickered across her features, though caution remained as she took one of the chairs facing the desk. I chose not to sit behind the imposing structure, instead taking the chair beside her, a small but deliberate choice to establish this as a conversation between colleagues rather than a hierarchical judgment. "I imagine you have questions," I began. Sophia nodded, her marketing director's analytical mind clearly processing the dramatic shift in corporate dynamics. "Several, though I'm not certain which are appropriate to ask." "Let me address the most pressing ones," I offered. "Yes, I am E.J. Kingston, majority shareholder and chairwoman of Meridian Technologies. Yes, I am also Eleanor Morrison, Daniel's wife, though that relationship is ending as of today. And no, you are not being terminated or penalized for Daniel's inappropriate behavior toward you." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, though confusion remained. "I appreciate your directness, Ms. Kingston, but I don't understand. If you've been in charge all along, why allow—" She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable completing the thought. "Why allow Daniel's behavior to continue?" I finished for her. "A fair question. The simple answer is that addressing individual misconduct without addressing the culture that enables it would have solved nothing. Meridian needed comprehensive evidence and a clear case for cultural transformation." Sophia processed this, her marketing strategist's mind recognizing the logic even if she didn't fully agree with the approach. "And my role in all this? I never encouraged his work-wife comments or other inappropriate behavior." "I know," I assured her. "The surveillance footage from this morning alone makes it clear you were attempting to maintain professional boundaries while under considerable pressure from a superior." She blinked in surprise. "There's footage from this morning?" "Meridian's executive spaces have always been monitored for security purposes," I explained. "The recordings proved invaluable in documenting patterns of behavior that individuals might have been reluctant to report formally." Understanding dawned in her expression. "That's why you called me here. You need my testimony for the case against Daniel." "Actually, no," I replied. "We have sufficient evidence without requiring any additional testimonies. I called you here for a different reason entirely." I nodded to Rebecca, who presented a folder containing official company documents. Sophia accepted it cautiously, eyes widening as she reviewed the contents. "This is a promotion," she said, looking up in confusion, "to Senior Director of Strategic Marketing with a 40% salary increase and expanded team." "It is," I confirmed. "The Richardson acquisition strategy was primarily your work, though Daniel presented it as his own. Your talents have been consistently undervalued and undersupported under the previous leadership structure." Sophia studied me with new appreciation, professional analyst replacing cautious subordinate. "You've been watching all of us, haven't you? Evaluating who was truly driving success versus who was claiming credit." "That's an accurate assessment," I acknowledged. "Meridian is undergoing a significant transition, effective immediately. We need leaders who succeed through innovation and collaboration, not manipulation and intimidation." She looked down at the promotion documents again, a smile finally breaking through her professional reserve. "The Richardson presentation is in less than 2 hours. Daniel was supposed to lead it." "I'll be handling that presentation personally," I informed her. With you presenting the strategic components you developed, it seems appropriate that the client should know whose vision they're actually investing in. For the first time since entering the office, Sophia relaxed completely. That would be appropriate, she agreed, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. One more thing, I added. The executive restructuring happening today involves the removal of several leaders who enabled or participated in the toxic culture Daniel fostered. We'll need transitional leadership in several departments while permanent replacements are identified. Understanding brightened her expression. You want me to help stabilize the marketing department during the transition? Precisely. Your team respects you, and you've maintained ethical standards despite considerable pressure to conform to the problematic culture. I gestured to the additional documents in her folder. The temporary leadership appointment includes appropriate compensation adjustments, of course. As Sophia reviewed the details, I could see her mentally recalibrating, from victim of harassment to recognized leader in the span of a single meeting. Her transformation mirrored the larger one Meridian would undertake in the coming months. Thank you for your confidence, Ms. Kingston, she said finally, extending her hand again, this time with genuine warmth. I won't disappoint you. After Sophia departed to prepare for the Richardson presentation, I moved behind the walnut desk for the first time, settling into the chair that had awaited me for years. The office felt simultaneously foreign and familiar, a space I had known existed but had never physically occupied. You should see this, Rebecca said, turning her tablet so I could view the security footage from the lobby. Daniel was still there, now arguing with the head of security while several employees watched from a discreet distance. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, tie loosened, hair disheveled from repeatedly running his hands through it, face flushed with impotent rage. I built half this company, he was insisting, voice raised enough to carry through the lobby. She can't just erase my contribution because of a few harmless comments at a party. The security chief remained professionally impassive. Your access has been revoked, Mr. Morrison. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have no choice but to involve the police. This is her doing, Daniel continued, gesturing wildly. My wife. Do you know what she was before me? Nothing. A trust fund socialite playing at business. I made her who she is. The irony of his delusion might have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. Even now, faced with incontrovertible evidence of my position, Daniel couldn't reconcile the wife. He had underestimated with the businesswoman who had outmaneuvered him. Have Thomas bring the car around, I instructed Rebecca. I believe it's time to address the company directly. She nodded, sending the message while continuing to monitor the situation in the lobby. He's leaving now, escorted by security, shouting something about lawyers and this not being over. It is over, I said quietly, almost to myself. He just doesn't know it yet. I rose from the desk, straightening my suit jacket and touching the emerald pin that had announced my identity to the company. The Kingston legacy had remained in the shadows long enough. The company-wide announcement is scheduled for 10:30 in the main auditorium, Rebecca confirmed. All departments have been notified, and the executive team, minus those being terminated, will be present on stage. I checked my reflection in the window glass, seeing not Daniel Morrison's underestimated wife, but E.J. Kingston, chairwoman of Meridian Technologies and architect of its future direction. It's strange, I observed as we headed toward the auditorium. I've addressed the company dozens of times through video conferences and written communications, but never as myself, never in person. They're nervous, Rebecca replied candidly. The rumor mill is in overdrive. Most employees only know that Daniel Morrison was escorted from the building and that the mysterious E.J. Kingston has finally appeared in person. The auditorium was Meridian's largest gathering space, capable of holding the headquarters' entire staff of nearly 500. As Rebecca and I approached, I could hear the buzz of conversation through the closed doors. Hundreds of employees speculating about the morning's dramatic events. Ready? Rebecca asked as we paused outside the entrance. I nodded, feeling a curious sense of homecoming. For years, I had hidden behind encrypted video calls and formal memos, guiding Meridian from a distance while maintaining my cover as Daniel's unassuming wife. That chapter was now closing, a new one beginning with a public reclaiming of both my name and my rightful place. More than ready, I replied. The doors opened, and conversation instantly ceased as employees noticed my entrance. I walked down the center aisle toward the stage, aware of the hundreds of eyes following my progress, the whispers that rippled in my wake as recognition dawned. On stage, the remaining executive team waited. Those who had maintained ethical standards during Daniel's reign, or had actively worked to protect employees from the toxic culture. Maria Vasquez stood at the center, poised to introduce me to a company that had been under my leadership for years without knowing my face. As I took my place at the podium, surveying the assembled employees of Meridian Technologies, I thought of my father, how proud he would be to see his company return to the values he had established, how satisfied to witness his daughter finally stepping into her inheritance, not just of wealth, but of purpose. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying easily through the state-of-the-art sound system. "My name is Eleanor Jane Kingston. Some of you have known me as E.J. Kingston, the majority shareholder who communicated only through encrypted channels. Others may recognize me as Elise Morrison, wife of the former VP of Operations." A murmur ran through the audience as those who hadn't heard the morning's news processed this revelation. Today, those separate identities merge into one truth. I am the daughter of Edward Kingston, founder of Meridian Technologies, and as of this morning, I am stepping into the role of active chairwoman of this company. The transformation was complete, from shadow to substance, from invisible influence to visible leadership. Daniel had called Sophia his new wife at our home, never imagining that his actual wife would reclaim not just her dignity, but her rightful position at the head of the company he thought he understood. As I prepared to outline the changes coming, to Meridian, the cultural reset, the leadership transitions, the renewed commitment to the values my father had established, I felt not triumph, but responsibility. The satisfaction of justice was secondary to the weight of the legacy I was now publicly embracing. The storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. And in that clarity, Eleanor Jane Kingston, no longer hidden behind aliases or accommodating masks, stood ready to lead Meridian Technologies into its next chapter. 1 month had passed since the day I revealed myself as Eleanor Jane Kingston, chairwoman of Meridian Technologies. 30 days of transformation that had reshaped not just the company, but my entire life. I stood at the window of my office, my father's office, watching the Chicago skyline as autumn painted the city in shades of amber and gold. The view was the same one I had glimpsed in encrypted video feeds for years, but experiencing it in person still carried a sense of novelty. "The quarterly numbers are finalized," Rebecca announced, entering with her ever-present tablet. "We're up 17% over projections despite the leadership transitions." I turned from the window, taking in the office that had finally become mine in more than name. My father's walnut desk now held several personal touches: a photograph of my parents at Meridian's founding, a small emerald paperweight matching my Kingston pin, and a single nameplate reading, "Eleanor Jane Kingston, Chairwoman." "And employee satisfaction metrics?" I asked, taking my seat behind the desk. Rebecca's expression softened into the hint of a smile. "Up 38%. Exit interviews with mid-level managers cite transformative cultural improvements and renewed emphasis on ethical leadership as the primary factors." The changes had been both swift and methodical. Beyond the termination of Daniel and his inner circle, we had implemented comprehensive harassment prevention training, restructured reporting procedures to protect whistleblowers, and established a governance committee specifically focused on workplace culture. "The Richardson account delivery exceeded all benchmarks," Rebecca continued, Mr. Richardson himself called it the most successful project implementation in their 15-year relationship with Meridian. Sophia's leadership has been exceptional, I observed. The promotion committee should accelerate their review of her permanent appointment to senior director. Rebecca nodded, making a note. Already in process. Also, legal has an update on the Daniel situation. I kept my expression neutral at the mention of my soon-to-be ex-husband. Go ahead. His attempt to contest the prenuptial agreement was denied by the court yesterday. The judge cited the explicit language protecting Kingston family assets and his legal representation during the original signing. She paused. He's also been rejected for executive positions at 3 competitor firms. Background checks revealed the circumstances of his termination from Meridian. I felt no satisfaction at this news, only a somber recognition of consequences justly applied. Daniel's downfall was entirely self-created, the natural result of years of misconduct finally exposed to daylight. Has he attempted further contact? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Rebecca's security monitoring was impeccable. 2 emails to your personal account, filtered as instructed. 1 voice message at the penthouse, also archived. The restraining order remains in effect after he appeared at the lobby last week. That incident had been both predictable and pathetic. Daniel, slightly intoxicated, demanding to see his wife, while security calmly but firmly removed him from the premises. The man who had once strutted through Meridian's corridors as if he owned them now couldn't even enter the building. The final divorce papers are scheduled for signing next Tuesday, Rebecca added. Your attorney confirms Daniel has exhausted his legal challenges. I nodded, closing that chapter mentally. And the press coverage of our corporate restructuring? Extremely positive. The technology sector is calling Meridian's response to harassment issues a new standard for corporate accountability. 3 industry publications have requested interviews about our cultural transformation initiatives. This was the outcome that mattered most, not personal vindication, but professional impact. Meridian's example was already influencing other companies to examine their own executive cultures, creating ripples that extended far beyond my personal satisfaction. Schedule the interviews, I decided. But make it clear the focus should be on our new policies and procedures, not on personal matters involving former executives. As Rebecca departed to implement these directives, Maria Vasquez appeared at my door. As CFO, she had been instrumental in the smooth transition following the executive terminations. The board meeting is starting in 10 minutes, she reminded me. But there's something you should see first. She handed me a tablet displaying an industry publications feature story. Meridian Technologies named Top Workplace for Women in Tech, following leadership overhaul. I scanned the article, noting its emphasis on the structural changes we had implemented rather than the dramatic circumstances that had precipitated them. This was progress, moving beyond the narrative of scandal, to focus on meaningful transformation. 1 month ago, this would have seemed impossible, Maria observed. The culture Daniel and his allies created had become so entrenched, many of us thought it was permanent. Nothing problematic is ever permanent if enough people decide to change it, I replied, returning the tablet. Shall we head to the board meeting? As we walked through the executive corridor, employees nodded respectfully, not with the fearful deference they had shown during Daniel's era, but with genuine professional regard. The atmosphere throughout the building had shifted perceptibly, tension replaced by purposeful energy. The boardroom was already filled when we arrived, board members engaged in relaxed pre-meeting conversation. Robert Blackwell, my father's oldest, friend and ally, rose as I entered. Eleanor, he greeted me warmly. I was just sharing with the governance committee how Edward would view today's agenda. And what would my father think? I asked, taking my seat at the head of the table. Robert's eyes crinkled with genuine emotion. He would say Meridian has finally returned to its founding principles, that the company he built to transform technology has transformed itself in precisely the way he would have wanted. The meeting proceeded with focused efficiency. Quarterly, results reviewed, strategic initiatives approved, succession planning for the restructured executive team finalized. Throughout the discussion, I remained fully present in a way that had never been possible during the years of operating through proxies and encrypted communications. As the meeting concluded, Jonathan Chen, our legal counsel, approached with one final item. The settlement agreements with the affected employees have been completed, he reported quietly. 17 individuals who experienced harassment under the previous leadership have accepted the compensation packages and specialized career development opportunities. This had been a personal priority, ensuring that those who had suffered under Daniel's toxic leadership received not just financial redress, but pathways to rebuild careers that had been damaged through no fault of their own. "Thank you, Jonathan," I said. "Make sure they all have my direct contact information should any further issues arise." As the board members departed, I remained at the table, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past month. The catalyst had been Daniel's public humiliation, calling Sophia his new wife while mocking my supposed financial dependence. But the transformation had been building long before that moment. Rebecca entered, carrying a small package. "This was just delivered from the house," she explained, placing it before me. Inside was my mother's jewelry box, a simple wooden case I had kept in my private study at the home I once shared with Daniel. Mrs. Hayes had packed it with her characteristic thoughtfulness, knowing its sentimental value. Among the contents was my original wedding ring, the one I had removed the morning of Daniel's termination. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though barely 30 days had passed. I placed it back in the box, closing it firmly. That chapter was ending, legally and emotionally. "The car is ready whenever you are," Rebecca informed me. "Though you might. Want to see this first?" She handed me her tablet, displaying security footage from the lobby. A familiar figure was visible. Daniel, standing outside the main entrance, staring up at the Meridian Tower with an expression of mingled bitterness and loss. After a few moments, he turned away, shoulders slumped, and walked toward a waiting taxi. "That was taken 10 minutes ago," Rebecca explained. "Security reports he didn't attempt to enter this time." I watched as the taxi pulled away, carrying with it the man who had been my husband, who had believed himself essential to a company he never truly understood, who had called another woman his wife without recognizing the power of the woman he was married to. "I think he's finally accepted reality," I observed, returning the tablet. As I gathered my belongings, preparing to leave for the day, my phone chimed with a message from Sophia. "Richardson Implementation Team just won Industry Innovation Award. For Q4, team celebration planned for Friday. Hope you can join us." I smiled at this evidence of Meridian's continued success under new leadership. The company was thriving not despite the dramatic changes, but because of them, proof that excising toxic elements creates space for healthier growth. In my private elevator descending to the garage level, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished doors. Eleanor Jane Kingston, no longer hiding behind aliases or accommodating masks. No longer E.J. Kingston, the distant chairwoman, or Elise Morrison, the underestimated wife, but simply myself. The lessons of the past month extended far beyond corporate governance or personal vindication. They spoke to deeper truths about power, perception, and patience. Sometimes the most consequential person in the room is the one others underestimate. Sometimes true strength lies in waiting for precisely the right moment to reveal your full capabilities. And sometimes, when someone calls another your replacement, whether as new wife or in any other role, they inadvertently create the perfect opportunity to show exactly who you've been all along. As I stepped into the evening air, Chicago's skyline glowing against the darkening sky, I felt neither triumph nor lingering resentment, but something more valuable. The quiet confidence of a woman who no longer needed to hide her power, her intelligence, or her rightful place. Daniel had called Sophia his new wife at a company party, never imagining that his actual wife owned 51% of the company. But the real story wasn't about his mistake. It was about my emergence, my reclamation of identity, and ultimately, my creation of something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. The company car waited at the curb, ready to take me home. Not to the house where I had played the role of Daniel's supportive wife, but to the penthouse where Eleanor Kingston would continue building the next chapter of a life finally, fully her own. If you've enjoyed this story of reclaiming power and identity, please consider subscribing to our channel for more narratives about unexpected strength and transformation. Remember that sometimes the most powerful person isn't the one making the most noise. It's the one with the patience to wait for the perfect moment to act.